Hello guys, I am Shirley Dash welcoming you to the show Pharmacy and Medical Crash Course Division in the Knowledge Club online. You know, I am coming with all the subjects topics in medical, pharmacy and life science one by one in medicine form only for you. From today, I am starting the series of episodes, the nervous system. Today, I came with the topic basic structure and function of the nervous system. By the end of this section, you will be able to identify the anatomical and functional divisions of the nervous system, relate the functional and structural differences between gray matter and white matter structures of the nervous system to the structure of neurons, list the basic functions of the nervous system. Stay tuned up to end because if you skip the lecture, you can miss our valuable points in between lecture. So stay tuned up to end. I am going to start today's episode. Let's start. The picture you have in your mind of the nervous system probably includes the brain, the nervous tissue contained within the cranium, and the spinal cord, the extension of nervous tissue within the vertebral column. That suggests it is made of two organs, and you may not even think of the spinal cord as an organ. But the nervous system is a very complex structure. Within the brain, many different and separate regions are responsible for many different and separate functions. It is as if the nervous system is composed of many organs that all look similar and can only be differentiated using tools such as the microscope or the electrophysiology. In comparison, it is easy to see that the stomach is different than the esophagus or the liver. So you can imagine the digestive system as a collection of specific organs. The central and peripheral nervous system. The nervous system can be divided into two major regions, the central and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, CNS, is the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is everything else. The brain is contained within the cranial cavity of the skull, and the spinal cord is contained within the vertebral cavity of the vertebral column. It is a bit of an oversimplification to say that the CNS is what is inside these two cavities and the peripheral nervous system is outside of them. But that is one way to start to think about it. Actually, there are some elements of the peripheral nervous system that are within the cranial or vertebral cavities. The peripheral nervous system is so named because it is on the periphery, meaning beyond the brain and spinal cord. Depending on different aspects of the nervous system, the dividing line between central and peripheral is not necessarily universal. Nervous tissue present in both the CNS and PNS contains two basic types of cells, that is neurons and glial cells. A glial cells is one of the variety of cells that provide a framework of tissue that supports the neurons and their activities. The neuron is the more functionally important of the two in terms of the communicative function of the nervous system. To describe the functional divisions of the nervous system, it is important to understand the structure of a neuron. In this episode, I am discussing a general overview of this. I will discuss in detail on neurons at next episode. Neurons are cells and therefore have a soma or cell body, but they also have extensions of the cell. Each extension is generally referred to as a process. There is one important process that every neuron has called an axon, which is the fiber that connects a neuron with its target. Another type of process that branches off from the soma is the dendrite. Dendrites are responsible for receiving most of the input from other neurons. Looking at the nervous tissue, there are regions that predominantly contain cell bodies and regions that are largely composed of just axons. These two regions within nervous system structures are often referred to as the grey matter, the regions with many cell bodies and dendrites, or white matter, the regions with many axons. The grey matter is not necessarily grey. It can be pinkish because of the blood content or even slightly tan, depending on how long the tissue has been preserved. But white matter is white because axons are insulated by a lipid-rich substance called myelin. Lipids can appear as white, the fatty material, much like the fat on a raw piece of chicken or beef. Actually, grey matter may have that color ascribed to it because next to the white matter it is just darker, hence grey. The distinction between grey matter and white matter is most often applied to central nervous tissue, which has large regions that can be seen with the unaided eye. When looking at peripheral structures, often a microscope is used and the tissue is stained with artificial colors. That is not to say that central nervous tissue cannot be stained and viewed under a microscope, but unstained tissue is most likely from the CNS. For example, a frontal section of the brain or cross-section of the spinal cord. Regardless of the appearance of stained or unstained tissue, the cell bodies of neurons or axons can be located in discrete anatomical structures that need to be named. Those names are specific to whether the structure is central or peripheral. A localized collection of neuron cell bodies in the CNS is referred to as a nucleus. In the PNS, a cluster of neuron cell bodies is referred to as a ganglion. It is the center of an atom where protons and neutrons are found. It is the center of a cell where the DNA is found, and it is the center of the some function in the CNS. There is also a potentially confusing use of the word ganglion. The plural form is the ganglia. That has a historical explanation. In the central nervous system, there is a group of nuclei that are connected together and were once called the basal ganglia before. The ganglion became accepted as a description for a peripheral structure. Some sources refer to this group of nuclei as the basal nuclei to avoid confusion. Terminology applied to bundles of axons also differ depending on the location. A bundle of axons or fibers found in the CNS is called a trap, whereas the same thing in the PNS would be called a nerve. There is an important point to make about these terms, which is that they can both be used to refer to the same bundle of axons. When those axons are in the PNS, the term is nerve. But if they are CNS, the term is trap. The most obvious examples of this is the axons that project from the retina into the brain. Those axons are called the optic nerve as they leave the eye. But when they are inside the cranium, they are referred to as the optic tract. There is a specific place where the name changes, which is the optic prism, but they are still the same axons. A similar situation outside of the science can be described for some roads. Imagine a road called the Broad Street is a town called Anvil. The road leaves Anvil and goes to the next town over called hometown. When the road crosses the line between the two towns and is in hometown, its name changes to Main Street. That is the idea behind the naming of the retinal axons. In the PNS, they are called the optic nerve, and in the CNS, they are the optic tract. The structures of the CNS and PNS, the group of neuron cell bodies that is grey matter, the nucleus and ganglion, the bundle of axons, the white matter, the tract and nervous. Functional divisions of the nervous system. The nervous system can also be divided on the basis of its function, but anatomical divisions and functional divisions are different. The CNS and the PNS both contribute to the same functions, but those functions can be attributed to different regions of the brain, such as the cerebral cortex or the hypothalamus, or to different ganglia in the periphery. The problem with trying to fit functional differences into anatomical divisions is that sometimes the same structure can be part of several functions. For example, the optic nerve carries signals from the retina that are either used for the conscious perception of visual stimuli, which takes place in the cerebral cortex, or for the reflexive responses of smooth muscle tissue that are processed through the hypothalamus. There are two ways to consider how the nervous system is divided functionally. First, the basic functions of the nervous system are sensation, integration, and response. Secondly, control of the body can be somatic or autonomic divisions that are largely defined by the structures that are involved in the response. There is also a region of the peripheral nervous system that is called the enteric nervous system that is responsible for a specific set of the functions within the realm of autonomic control related to gastrointestinal function. Basic functions of the nervous system. The nervous system is involved in receiving information about the environment around us as sensation and generating responses to that information, the motor responses. The nervous system can be divided into regions that are responsible for sensation, that is sensory functions, and for the response, the motor functions. But there is a third function that needs to be included. The sensory input needs to be integrated with other sensation as well as with memories, emotional state, or learning, the cognition. Some regions of the nervous system are termed integration or association areas. The process of integration combines sensory perceptions and higher cognitive functions such as memory, learning, and emotion to produce a response. Number 1, that is sensation. The first major function of the nervous system is sensation. Receiving information about the environment to gain input about what is happening outside the body or sometimes within the body. The sensory functions of the nervous system register the presence of a change from homeostasis or a particular event in the environment, known as a stimulus. The senses we think of most are the big five: taste, smell, touch, sight, and hearing. The stimuli for taste and smell are both chemical substances, molecules, compounds, ions, etc. Touch is physical or mechanical stimuli that interact with the skin. Sight is light stimuli, and hearing is the perception of sound, which is a physical stimulus similar to some aspects of touch. There are actually more senses than just those, but that list represents the major senses. Those five are all senses that receive stimuli from the outside world and of which there is conscious perception. Additional sensory stimuli might be from the internal environment, the inside the body, such as the stretch of an organ wall or the concentration of certain ions in the blood. Number 2, that is response. The nervous system produces a response on the basis of the stimuli prescribed by sensory structure. An obvious response would be the movement of muscles such as withdrawing a hand from a hot stove, but there are broader uses of the term. The nervous system can cause the contraction of all three types of muscle tissue. For example, skeletal muscle contracts to move the skeleton. Cardiac muscle is influenced as heart rate increases during exercise, and smooth muscle contracts as the digestive system moves food along the digestive tract. Responses also include the neural control of the glands in the body as well, such as the production and secretion of sweat by the eccrine and merocrine sweat gland found in the skin to lower body temperature. Responses can be divided into those that are voluntary or conscious, contraction of skeletal muscle, and those that are involuntary, the contraction of smooth muscle, regulation of cardiac muscle, activation of glands, that is. The voluntary responses are governed by the somatic nervous system and involuntary responses are governed by the autonomic nervous system, which will be discussed in another episode. Third is integration. Stimuli that are received by sensory structures are communicated to the nervous system where that information is processed. This is called the integration. Stimuli are compared with or integrated with other stimuli, memories of previous stimuli or the state of a person at a particular time. This leads to the specific response that will be generated. Seeing a baseball pitched to a batter will not automatically cause the batter to swing. The trajectory of the ball and its speed will need to be considered. Maybe the count is 3 balls and 1 strike, and the batter wants to let this pitch go by in the hope of getting a walk to first base. Or maybe the batter's team is so far ahead it would be fun to just swing away. Fourth one, the controlling the body. The nervous system can be divided into 2 parts mostly on the basis of the functional differences in responses. The somatic nervous system, SNS, is responsible for conscious perception and voluntary motor responses. Voluntary motor response means the contraction of the skeletal muscle, but those contractions are not always voluntary in the sense that you have to want to perform them. Some somatic motor responses are reflexes and often happen without a conscious decision to perform them. If your friend jumps out from behind a corner and yells "boo," you will be startled and you might scream or leap back. You didn't decide to do that, and you may not have wanted to give your friend a reason to laugh at your expense. But it is a reflex involving skeletal muscle contraction. Other motor responses become autonomic, in other words, the unconscious. A person learns motor skills referred to as the habit learning or procedural memory. The autonomic nervous system ANS is responsible for involuntary control of the body, usually for the sake of homeostasis, regulation of the internal environment. The sensory input for autonomic functions can be from sensory structures turned to external or internal environmental stimuli. The motor output extends to smooth and cardiac muscle as well as glandular tissue. The role of the autonomic system is to regulate the organ systems of the body, which usually means to control homeostasis. Sweat glands, for example, are controlled by the autonomic system. When you are hot, sweating helps cool your body down. That is a homeostatic mechanism. But when you are nervous, you might start sweating also. That is not homeostatic. It is the physiological response to an emotional state. There is another division of the nervous system that describes functional responses. The enteric nervous system ENS is responsible for controlling the smooth muscle and glandular tissue in your digestive system. It is a large part of the PNS and is not dependent on the CNS. It is sometimes valid, however, to consider the enteric system to be a part of the autonomic system because the neural structures that make up the enteric system are a component of the autonomic output that regulates digestion. There are some differences between the two, but for our purposes, here there will be a good bit of overlap. Revise it and I am sure you will require less time to remember all the structures. Write me at the comment box how much time you take to remember to heart anatomy after viewing today's lecture. Before ending today's episode, if you like this video, please like, share and comment freely. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. If you already subscribed, then thanks a lot. And after subscribing our channel, please click on the bell button for getting the regular updates of Knowledge Club Online. I am coming with the another episodes very shortly for you. Till then, goodbye.